So probably one of the most widely used finesse techniques in the sport of bass fishing today is going to be a drop shot. But with all of the different combinations of baits out there on the market, it can kind of become clustered with knowing what baits you need to use versus what baits you don't need to use, because that's constantly a struggle, is buying tackle and figuring out what actually works and what is hyped up that doesn't actually work. So today what I want to do is break down my 5 favorite drop shot baits that cover you for all different scenarios, and I'll even talk about the scenarios that I like to run them, because I really think this is going to help you guys save a lot of money on tackle and really be a whole lot better off with your finesse fishing game. So a drop shot is the only bait out there that you can actually move vertically without moving it horizontally. So you can keep it in one spot and continually move that bait and get a lot of action out of it without actually having to move it through the water column. And so that's what really builds up a drop shot, and that's what makes it so good. And with that, it works so good for all different species, which is why it is such a popular technique. It works just as good for smallmouth as it does for largemouth and spotted bass. It works good in 100 feet of water, and it works good in 2 feet of water, which is the versatility of this bait is literally unparalleled in the industry right now. And so there's really a couple different categories of baits when it comes to drop shot baits that I'm going to talk about. It's going to be your worms, it's going to be your finesse baits, and then it's going to be one little bait that I like to talk about too that we're going to get to kind of at the end. So I know that I've talked about 5, but I'm going to add a bonus one in there that I just thought about. And so the first ones that we're going to talk about are going to be the worms. I like 2 different worms specifically for largemouth. I don't necessarily reach for finesse worms when it comes to smallmouth. I have a couple other baits that I like. I know they eat finesse worms, but I really don't reach for them. And so the 2 worms that I grabbed is going to be the traditional 6-inch straight tail robo worm, and then you're going to have that Z-Man SMH worm. And you might say, why 2 different worms? Well, the reason is the Elastec in that Z-Man bait makes it super awesome when those fish are really chewing, because I love to pick up a drop shot when I'm fishing grass for largemouth because the hookup ratio is so good with that bigger hook on there, and there's just no better presentation for it when I'm fishing isolated rock piles or isolated cover like a log, a stump, etc. So a drop shot is a really good option for that, and when they're really chewing, that Z-Man Elastec does a really good job of floating above the cover, and you can really keep it in their face. That works good when fish are suspended, on stumps, when they're on beds, when they're guarding fry. That's also a great option, and just keeping it out of the muddy bottom, that does a great job. Now on the other side of that, the robo worm does a great job because it actually falls. That Z-Man worm floats, but the robo worm falls. And so what I'll do with that one is I find myself wacky rigging this bait, and so I still Texas rig it on a drop shot, but I like to wacky rig it a whole lot more, and I really throw that one when I'm fishing around rock, really pressured fish, where I can get more action out of that bait by keeping it in the same spot, because I can sit there and drop it and pick it up and drop it and pick it up and really just work that area over. And that's when fish are being really picky, is when I reach for that bait. But those are my 2 worms that I really like. And when I'm largemouth fishing, I really don't pick up a lot of other baits. Only when they're being really stubborn. If they're guarding fry or doing something really goofy, then I might pick up one of these other baits. But those are the 2 worms that I'm really going to reach for. And now we're going to get into kind of my smallmouth, spotted bass, and my finesse baits. And so there's 3 baits that I really like when I'm talking about finesse fishing with a drop shot. And the first of which is going to be one that can't be ignored no matter how much I hate it. That is going to be a max scent flatworm. That max scent flatworm has just been on fire in the industry lately. There's no comparison with the scent, with that lifelike rubber that they have in there. It does a really good job at getting bites in places that a lot of other baits aren't getting bites. Do I think it's the best one out there? No, but you just can't ignore how good it has been, especially with the scent infused in there. So that max scent's got to be on your list. The next one is a staple of mine, and I know my buddy Colton watching this video is going to absolutely love this. It's going to be a Yamamoto shad shaped worm. It is just a bait that has gotten a lot of bites and catches the fire out of smallmouth and spotted bass no matter where you go, even largemouth. That's just a great bait. They make it in a couple different sizes now. And again, I'll have all this stuff linked down below like I always do. I'll even have my rod combos, my rod and reel and line combos linked down below, even though we're not going to really break that down today. That might be another video. But yeah, that Yamamoto shad shaped worm has just been a fish catcher for me and a lot of other guys, especially up here on the Great Lakes where those smallmouth are specifically finicky. So that's one that I really can't ignore. And those 2 baits, they do a really good job at, like that robo worm, they fall and they rise. So I use those a lot when I'm fishing for finicky fish, when I'm making long casts at fish, and anywhere there's no current. I really like those baits because I can get a lot more action out of them. And the last bait that I want to talk about in the finesse category is going to be a Z-Man Trickshots. And the reason I like that bait is because that bait floats, and that Elastec does a great job at the durability aspect of it. So when I'm up north smallmouth fishing and those fish are on fire and they're eating that bait left and right, I can really get a lot more fish catches for that bait. And when I'm drift fishing, that bait stays up off the bottom, so those fish come up to eat it, and I get hung up a lot less. And so you just get that nice horizontal action where that bait sits there and just waves back and forth as it's drifting in the current, and so I can catch a ton of fish with that bait. It also does a great job at bed fishing. You know, bed fish, especially smallmouth, aren't the smartest species out there, so when I'm going through a lot of baits, I can switch to that, and it even elevates up off the bed a little bit, so it sits right in their face, and I catch a ton of fish on that bait. And that brings me to the last bait that I kind of just thought about, which is going to be a swim bait. A swim bait is one that people don't necessarily think about on a drop shot, but it does a great job at covering water. So it's a great smallmouth, largemouth, spotted bass bait that I can really utilize all times of the year for suspended fish in the column. If I want to throw it and reel it over their heads, you know, if they're suspended 60 feet down or 30 feet down, I can use that drop shot to get that bait there fast, but not have to put a giant heavy head on there. And so that does a great job at that. And it also does a great job at just if you're Great Lakes fishing or if you're drift fishing, or if you don't have great electronics and you're just trying to cover water, you can put that drop shot on the bottom and just drag that paddle tail along through there and get a ton of bites. And so that's the last bait that I want to talk about right there, because a drop shot, man, it does such a good job at getting bites. It is such a great finesse tool. But the other finesse tool that I want to talk about is going to be a Ned rig. So at the end of this video, I'll have linked up here a masterclass of Ned rigs, because it is one of my personal favorite techniques. That's a video you guys are not going to want to miss out on. But thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and I hope y'all take care.